Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Traci Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. It is my first episode back since maternity leave, and I haven't done this in, I don't know, at least 7 or 8 months, because I basically did all of the recordings for the podcast for while I was out through the summer. So I don't know. Hopefully I can remember how to podcast and know where to look for those of you who watch the video. And hopefully my microphone is working well and everything else. So anyway, I guess the first things first, I'm back from maternity leave. I'm actually recording this episode 1 month to the day from my return to work. So I have a lot to catch up with you on, but I do want to do some housekeeping. One, you might hear my daughters in the background. It's just my new reality, and hopefully I've been able to curate an environment, at least for podcasting, that is as least distracting as possible, or as little has as few distractions, as possible. And if there is some background noise like toys or pianos or music or babies crying or screaming or laughing, I do apologize in advance. We are going to work to edit that out if possible, but this is just reality. So let me catch you up in case you don't follow me on Instagram. I had 2 daughters, they're twins. We actually found out that they are identical, which is really exciting. And they are now almost 6 months old. They're like 5.5 months old at the time of this recording. I'm not trying to rush time, just trying to accurately describe their age. I was out on maternity leave from the end of October until the middle of March, and it was a great amount of time for me. I felt totally ready to come back, but also, equal parts like sad that it was over. But I have a lot to kind of talk about through that return from leave with all of you. But just to quickly see, I think there might be a baby in the background there. Just before I go into that topic, I do also want to say that I know that there have been some replay episodes throughout these last few months, and maybe you have been totally craving a new and fresh episode. So I get that. You can expect that all of these episodes that will be up and coming, with the exception of a few, because of course I had some scheduled already. Most, I would say 98% of them are fresh recordings. So hopefully you're really excited about that. I know I am. I know my guests are really excited to join. And then thinking about the podcast, right now I do plan to have an episode every week. It is, of course, a lot of work to work full time and be a mom to 2 kids and a wife and just a person in general, like outside of those things. So right now, my goal is to continue with 1 episode a week. I think realistically, there might be some months or even a part of the year where I say, you know what, I can't do an episode every week. I need to do every other week. So we'll see. All I ask is for your patience and for you to maybe just go along for this ride with me, as you always have if you've been here from the beginning, so that I can kind of learn what works for me as we go along. But I definitely am keeping up with the podcast. It's a very important part of my life and how I see my career. So I'm just excited to kind of get back into it, So that being said, I do want to share with you what some reflections are that I have from being out on maternity leave and coming back to work. And with all of that, I also encourage you to follow me on Instagram. While I'm not necessarily the most active on stories as maybe other people in this, podcasting world or realm, it's where I tend to be able to interact with you the most directly. And you can visit my website at hrtraci.com for tons of information and blogs and newsletters and everything like that. So without further ado, let's jump into what my takeaways are from being back from maternity leave. Okay, so my first takeaway from maternity leave is that I think the one of the best things that I did was prepare while I was out on leave for my return, because it was always the plan for me to return. I'm I'm obviously very driven by my career. I have this podcast. I love my career in HR. I love what I do. I love where I work and with whom I work. And the first episode of 2024 was with Lori Mahalik Levin, and we talked about the mindful return. And she, of course, knew at that time that I was pregnant, and I shared that obviously in the episode as well. But we recorded that podcast episode, I want to say maybe in August, July, August, or September, and maybe even a little bit earlier. Anyway, not the point. She and I were talking about how important it is to be prepared when you come back from a maternity leave, paternity leave, whatever it is. And I took her mindful return course in January. So at that point, I was 2 months postpartum, almost three. And I took the course throughout. I think it was like a 6-week course, if I'm remembering correctly. And it really allowed me to think about what I would kind of prepare for as I was returning from leave, whether it was setting boundaries, what my schedule was going to look like, would there be any changes to my schedule, changes to the way that I needed to work, and especially being a remote employee. Of course, I have innate flexibility already, but there are elements of my job that sometimes do require me to color outside of the lines within, a daily schedule, let's say. And so that course really allowed me to think about what I needed, which, for those of you who have been here for a while, you've heard me talk about myself in the way that, sometimes I just am very quick to action, and I don't necessarily like fully think through all of the implications of what I do for myself. And so that was a really important exercise and very impactful exercise for me, because it slowed me down. And anything that slows me down is usually going to get the best and most thoughtful interaction from me. So, personally, that was really important, because I don't know that I would have really thought about what the differences would have been, or what I needed that might have been different from when I was working prior to my maternity leave. So that was really helpful. And Lori is awesome, and her book is great. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I think it was the first episode of 2024. It was the first or second. Definitely have a listen to it, because we kind of walk through the mindful return theory and her book, and how you can have a successful return from leave, because it is a major transition. I mean, everyone would ask me kind of leading up to returning, like, are you ready? How do you feel? And then even now, being back one entire month, I've been asked by my supervisor, colleagues, etc., how has it been? How has the transition been? And so certainly it is a transition. For me, I think that preparation was key. The second takeaway that I have from maternity leave is kind of lending to this idea around the transition, that you are a different person when you come back. As much as you are the same, you also are different, because you went through a major life event and you had a child, in my case, 2 children. And there's just a lot that changes when your responsibilities change and when your priorities change. And for me, although my work is absolutely my priority, if one of my children is sick, or our nanny isn't able to come to work, right? Like, that changes the way that I am able, God forbid, on all of those fronts, right? Like, because we don't want that to happen, but inevitably things happen. And I need to be able to be agile and shift, and balancing those priorities that are really important, life at home and life at work. It can be challenging, and it's something that you do have to kind of think about. And so my takeaway with the transition in coming back to work is that I was and still am excited to be back at work. And I do think that that's in part because I love what I do and where I work and with whom I work, also because I was prepared for it. And then thirdly, I think because I work remotely and because I feel some agency over my schedule, I didn't necessarily feel that the transition was so difficult or complex or frustrating. And I really think that the emphasis is on the preparation and being remote, because I don't know that I would be having this same conversation with all of you if I worked in an office. I've said it ad nauseum on my podcast that I will only ever look for remote work if ever I was not where I am today. And for anyone that I work with, don't worry. I love being where I am and I have no intention of leaving. But obviously, like, just generally speaking, if if I were ever to be in search for a job, it would never be looking for an office based role, because now being a mom, seeing the flexibility and what that affords me as a parent, that now it went from being like the most important thing to the tippy top most important thing. I would take a pay cut to keep that my reality. So, and I feel like I've probably said that before being a parent too. So maybe not much has changed on that front, but regardless, like, you really do change. And for me, again, that transition really didn't feel so complicated. And I feel grateful for that. I mean, I'm very fortunate that we're able to have someone come in for daycare basically and caregiving for my daughters rather than needing to send them out of my home. I think that's one a privilege that I have from working remotely, and two, a privilege that I have just from a financial perspective, because childcare is really expensive. And I'm sure that there are listeners out there who either have not returned from maternity leave or don't plan to because of the cost of childcare, and two, maybe are returning to the job force because they left in order to be the primary caregiver in their homes because of the cost of childcare. And it is so expensive, especially in New York and New Jersey. It's crazy. And I think it's probably just expensive everywhere. But um, I mean, for two kids, it is kind of comparable, like daycare and having someone come in and be with them. But regardless, like, that is a major factor for many parents, especially women. And I think we kind of talked about that in the episode, Lori and I, that, not everyone is able to go back to work because the cost of childcare is more expensive than what they receive monthly from their jobs. So it's a lot for people to have to think about. And fortunately for me, I was able to, and we were able to, my husband and I, make it work so that I could come back to work, and so that we could have someone in our home while I am working. And that, it's not lost on me that COVID did have this, or create this opportunity for me. I don't know that I would be remote or be in this situation today had it not been for that. Everyone kind of challenging the status quo, so to speak, and moving remotely. Although I work for a tech company and they've always been remote, who knows where things would have landed me if COVID didn't happen. Like, would I still be in retail? Would I still be in fashion? Would I be in tech? Who knows? I always like think about those things. Like, what if things happen differently? What would I be doing now? And I really, frankly, I don't know that I would return to work if I wasn't remote. It's really hard. It's really hard to, especially in the US, where, I mean, fortunately in New York, you get, a really nice amount of time. But in the US, some states don't get any paid time. It's just, FMLA, 12 weeks, hopefully, if you qualify. And, that's that. So for me, fortunately, I had almost 5 months, but it was hard, even though I'm right here and my children are literally, I don't know, 15 feet away. It's hard to realize that you are inevitably not spending that same amount of time with them. And whether you want to be a full-time, caretaker or home taker or not, it is still difficult to, be a hands-on parent and or not walk away, but step into work and change the amount of time that you're spending with your kids. So, I mean, I feel good. Like, I feel happy that they're right here. And when I'm in between meetings, I can kind of step away and just, pop over and, like, I don't know, cuddle them for like a moment before I go into my next meeting or get back into whatever project I'm working on. Um, and that's obviously, again, not lost on me that I have that opportunity. And I'm sure that many people feel that same way. And that I know that there are many people who really look forward to leaving the house when they return from maternity leave, because it gives them kind of like another refreshed or renewed sense of self, because your sense of self also changes when you become a parent. At least it did for me. I think probably for most people, because you're no longer just thinking of yourself, you're now thinking of your children. So it's just a really interesting change, and I'm really grateful for it. I love being a parent and a mom, and I love being a working parent or a working mom. And obviously, all moms are working at some level. But I guess I should say a mom in the quote unquote typical workforce, because being a stay at home mom is definitely a job. Like, when I was on maternity leave, it was work, hard work, especially with two at the same, stage of development and the same age. So, the third takeaway that I have is that you really benefit from returning from maternity leave or leave in general when you have an amazing supervisor and peers that you enjoy working with. That was probably the biggest takeaway that I had kind of like learned and appreciated, outside of the other two, of course, but really the thing that stuck out to me most was that, oh wow, I'm not stressed or unhappy about returning, because I'm looking forward to working with my peers, and I'm looking forward to working with and for my boss. And I'm very, very fortunate for that. I know so many people who dreaded returning from maternity leave because they either don't like their leaders or they don't like who they work with. And that is just not what the case was for me. And I feel very lucky that I have a boss that I really admire and look up to and enjoy working with, and that I have colleagues that I can say the same thing about, that I really enjoy working with, that I love learning from, that I love just chatting with. And all those, that is, I don't know, it's not something that occurred to me. I guess when I was out on maternity leave, I was only thinking about preparing for the stuff that I could control. And then I was like, oh, wait, I'm really looking forward to returning. Why is that? And introspectively, I had, spent this time thinking about why. Why was I excited to go back to work? Not like, why am I feeling this way? But also, or I should say, it wasn't coming from this place of like, why do I feel this way? It was coming from a place of, why is that? Why am I so excited? And why aren't other people more excited when they want to go back to work, but they're feeling like this dread or this burden? And of course, all of those factors that I had already mentioned have an impact on that. But really, it's profound to me that when you have someone that you enjoy working for and you work with people that you like, it makes returning much, much easier. So if you're someone that is on maternity leave or on some sort of leave and you're dreading coming back or going back, maybe take that same introspective journey. Think about why that might be. Is it the environment? Is it your boss? Is it that you need a change? Or is it, the other stuff that you really don't want to go back and that you have to go back? Because certainly that is the case for many too, that financially you can't make the decision to stay at home even though you really want to. In which case I'm like, well, can you figure it out? Can you, like, because I never want anyone to feel like they're robbed of an experience that they really want. Like, if someone really wants to be a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad or a stay-at-home parent, whatever, is there a way that they can make that work? And if not, like, I don't know, maybe there's just a way. Maybe it's like going into consulting. Maybe it's doing freelance work. I don't know. Get creative with it. Don't find yourself in this position where you're going to regret that you did or didn't do something. So anyway, those are my takeaways. I actually shared this on LinkedIn also because when I came back, I felt really inspired to just write something. It was short, it was sweet, hopefully. And I feel good about putting it out there because now when I go back to it, I'm like, yeah, I did feel all of these things. And then of course I'm sharing those feelings with you on the podcast today. But in the end, I hope that as I continue on my journey as a mom that works in the typical, workforce, I hope that I continue to feel these takeaways resonating throughout my work day and work week. And I hope that I keep this as a reminder that there's so much to really be grateful for and thankful for in not only our careers and our experiences becoming parents, if those of you, either are trying to become parents or are parents already or want to be, there's so much to really be thankful for. And whether it's difficult or not, and it's always difficult to be responsible for a living, breathing human being. But yeah, those are the things that I top of mind wanted to share with all of you. And when I think about the podcast going forward, I know I already shared how things might be a little bit more fluid or flexible. I also want to mention that, my episodes going forward are going to have more fresh, amazing new guests and maybe some revisits from some fan favorites, so to speak, from the past few years. We're going on to the 4th year of this podcast. I just cannot believe it. I really appreciate that you're all here for the journey, that you were patient with me as I was out on leave and taking a creative liberty to my podcast and doing a replay series and things like that and spreading the episodes out across my maternity leave. But I'm really excited to be back. I highly, highly suggest that you follow me on Instagram, connect with me on LinkedIn, head to my website, hrtraci.com. I am still doing career coaching and resume and interview preparation, formatting, et cetera, et cetera. So if those are things that you're interested in and want to learn more about, head to my website. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're catching this episode. And if you're watching this video on YouTube or Spotify, make sure you interact with the Q&A or give the video a thumbs up if you're on YouTube. Thank you so much again for being here, and I'll see you next week. Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.